In Lagos, Nigeria, 27-year-old Zainab Balagan took a deep breath and looked at herself one last time in the mirror. She was wearing a simple, plain dress, no designer label, no jewelry, nothing that hinted at who she really was. Even her hair was styled in a soft, natural way, nothing flashy. Outside, the driver of a basic rideshare car waited. Not her car. Not the sleek luxury vehicle she actually owned. Today was important. She was finally going to meet her boyfriend Tunde Adeyemi's parents. But Zainab wasn't nervous for the usual reason. She was curious. Over the past few months, Tunde had made small comments that stayed in her mind. Things like, "My parents really value status," or, "They like people who are well established." He never said anything directly wrong, but it was enough to make her wonder, would they judge her based on who she was, or what she had? So Zainab made a decision. She wouldn't show them her real life. Not her successful logistics company that was growing faster than she ever imagined. Not the long nights she had spent building something from nothing. Not the contracts, the connections, the money. None of it. Today, she would meet them as someone simple. Someone with no visible status. Someone they might overlook. As the car stopped in front of Tunde's family house, Zainab felt a small knot in her stomach. For a second, she questioned her plan. What if this went wrong? What if she didn't like what she discovered? But then she reminded herself why she was doing this. She wasn't testing them just to prove a point. She was protecting her future. Zainab stepped out of the car, smoothed her dress, and walked toward the door. A small, polite smile formed on her face, but her eyes were sharp, observant. Tonight, she wasn't just meeting her boyfriend's parents. She was about to see their true colors. And deep down, she had a feeling, this night would change everything. The moment Zainab stepped into the house, she felt it. That small, uncomfortable shift in the air that people don't say out loud, but you can feel it instantly. Tunde's mother, Mrs. Adeyemi, looked at her from head to toe. Not a quick glance, a full scan. Her eyes paused on Zainab's simple dress, her bare wrists, her plain shoes. Then she forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, welcome," she said, her tone polite, but cold underneath. Tunde's father didn't even bother to hide it. He gave a short nod from his seat, barely looking at her before turning his attention back to his phone. Zainab smiled gently and greeted them with respect, trying to keep things warm. But inside, she already knew, this wasn't going to be easy. They all sat down, and within seconds, the questions started. "So, Zainab, what do you do?" his mother asked, leaning back like she was waiting for something impressive. Zainab kept her voice calm. "I work in logistics," she said simply. No details, no titles. No mention of being a founder. There was a short pause. "Oh," Mrs. Adeyemi replied, clearly unimpressed. Then came the next question. "Where is your family from?" Zainab answered politely again, keeping it simple, not trying to decorate her story or make it sound bigger than it was. And just like that, the energy changed. It was subtle, but clear. The curiosity disappeared. The smiles faded. The effort was gone. Mrs. Adeyemi nodded slowly, like she had already made up her mind. Tunde's father didn't even ask a single follow-up question. It was like Zainab had already been placed in a box, and they were done figuring her out. Zainab sat there quietly, her hands resting gently in her lap, her expression calm. But inside, she felt it. That quiet sting. Not because they didn't know who she really was, but because they didn't even try to. In just a few minutes, without knowing her story, her struggles, or her success, they had already decided her worth. And in that moment, Zainab understood something very clearly. This wasn't just a first impression. This was judgment. And it hurt more than she expected. As dinner went on, the uncomfortable feeling didn't fade. It actually got worse. At first, everything looked normal on the surface. Plates were brought to the table, drinks were served, and small talk filled the room. But the more Zainab paid attention, the more she noticed the little things, the kind of things people think no one will catch. Tunde's mother suddenly brought up another woman. "You know, Tunde," she said with a light smile, "we saw Adiz last week. Such a lovely girl. Very successful too. Her family is well known, and she just got a big promotion." Zainab stayed quiet, but she could feel the direction of the conversation. Mrs. Adeyemi continued, almost proudly, "A woman like that understands class. She knows how to carry herself." There was a short silence at the table. The message was clear, even if no one said it directly. Zainab gave a small polite smile, pretending not to notice. But inside, she noticed everything. Then came the small action. When food was served, Tund's parents were given full attention. Tund got the best portion, but when it came to Zainab, the effort dropped. Her plate was placed in front of her quickly, without a word, like an afterthought. The conversation moved on, but somehow, she wasn't part of it anymore. They talked about business, connections, big names, topics Zainab knew very well. Ironically, she probably knew more than anyone at that table. But no one asked for her opinion. No one even looked her way. It was like she wasn't important enough to be included. Even when she tried to politely join in once or twice, the responses were short, almost dismissive. The conversation quickly shifted away from her, as if her voice didn't belong there. Tund sat quietly the whole time, eating, occasionally nodding, but saying nothing to change the situation. Zainab kept her posture straight, her expression calm, and her voice soft whenever she spoke. From the outside, she looked completely unbothered. But inside, she was paying attention to every detail, every look, every tone, every small act of disrespect that no one thought she would notice. And with each passing minute, one thing became clearer to her. This wasn't just rudeness. This was how they truly saw her. And Zainab was silently taking notes, because she knew this night was telling her everything she needed to know. What hurt Zainab the most that night wasn't even his parents. It was Tund. She kept waiting for him to say something, anything. A small correction. A simple sentence like, "Mom, that's not fair," or, "You don't know her yet." But it never came. He just sat there, quiet. When his mother compared her to that perfect woman, he didn't react. When his father ignored her, he didn't step in. When Zainab was slowly pushed out of every conversation, he didn't try to pull her back in. It was like he didn't even notice. Or worse, like he noticed and chose to say nothing. At one point, Zainab glanced at him, hoping to catch his eyes. She thought maybe he would give her a reassuring look, a small smile, something to say, "I'm here with you." But he just looked down at his plate and kept eating. That moment hit her harder than anything else that happened that night. Because this wasn't just about his parents anymore. This was about the man she thought she knew. Zainab started thinking back to all the times Tund had been kind, supportive, loving. The way he used to listen to her, the way he made her feel seen. Was that real? Or was this the real version of him, the one who stayed silent when it actually mattered? Her chest felt tight, but she didn't let it show. She kept her face calm, her voice steady, her posture graceful. No one at that table could see what was going on inside her. But inside, everything was shifting. She realized something uncomfortable. It's easy for someone to be good to you when everything is perfect, when there's no pressure, no conflict, no reason to choose sides. But tonight was different. Tonight, Tund had a choice, and he chose silence. Zainab wasn't expecting him to argue with his parents or create drama. She didn't want that. But she did expect something small, something human. Respect, support, presence. Instead, she felt alone, sitting right next to him. And for the first time since they started their relationship, a quiet question formed in her mind, one she couldn't ignore anymore. Was this really the man she wanted to build a future with? Or had she just been in love with a version of him that only existed when things were easy? Dinner was almost over when it happened, the moment that changed everything for Zainab. Up until then, she had been quiet, patient, and respectful. She had ignored the small insults, the cold looks, the way she was treated like she didn't belong. A part of her was still hoping, maybe things would get better. But they didn't. Mrs. Adeyemi gently placed her fork down, wiped her hands, and leaned back in her chair. Then she looked directly at Tund, not even at Zainab, and said in a calm but sharp voice, "You know, our son deserves someone who can match his lifestyle." The room went completely silent. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. But it didn't need to be. The message was clear. Zainab felt it land, but she didn't react the way anyone might expect. She didn't argue. She didn't get angry. She didn't defend herself. Instead, she smiled. A soft, polite, controlled smile. But inside, something shifted completely. That one sentence told her everything she needed to know. Not just about his mother, but about the entire situation. About how they saw her. About what they valued. About where she truly stood in their eyes. And then, almost without thinking, her eyes moved to Tund. This was his moment. This was the moment where he could say something. Even a simple, "Mom, that's enough," would have been enough. But once again, he stayed silent. He didn't correct her. He didn't defend Zainab. He didn't even look uncomfortable. He just sat there. And that silence spoke louder than his mother's words. At that point, Zainab stopped feeling hurt. She stopped feeling confused. Everything became clear. This was no longer a test. She wasn't sitting there trying to figure them out anymore. She already had her answer. Now, she was making a decision. About her future. About her relationship. About the kind of life she wanted, and the kind of people she wanted in it. She realized something powerful in that moment. If someone can sit quietly while you are being disrespected, they are part of that disrespect. Zainab kept her smile, finished her meal calmly, and said nothing. But deep inside, her decision was already made. And there was no going back. When dinner finally ended, Zainab didn't rush out or show any sign of frustration. She calmly placed her napkin on the table, stood up, and gave a polite smile, just like she had been doing all evening. "Thank you for having me," she said softly. Her voice was respectful. Her tone was steady. No one could tell what she was really feeling inside. Tun's mother gave a short nod, her expression still distant. His father barely reacted, just like before. It was as if Zainab's presence had never truly mattered in the first place. But Zainab didn't let that change her behavior. She carried herself with quiet dignity, picked up her small bag, and walked toward the door. No drama. No confrontation. No need to prove anything. Because at this point, she didn't need their approval anymore. As soon as she stepped outside, the cool night air hit her face. For a second, she paused, taking a deep breath. It felt like she was finally able to breathe again after holding everything in for so long. Behind her, she heard quick footsteps. "Zainab, wait," Tun called out, catching up to her. He looked confused, almost worried. "You're really quiet. Is everything okay?" Zainab turned to face him slowly. Her expression was calm, too calm. Not angry, not emotional, just certain. For a moment, she just looked at him, like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. Then she spoke. "Tonight told me everything I needed to know." Tun frowned, not fully understanding. "What do you mean? It wasn't that bad, they just—" She gently shook her head, stopping him before he could finish. "No," she said quietly. "It was exactly what I needed to see." There was no anger in her voice. That's what made it hit harder. Tund opened his mouth, like he wanted to explain, to fix things, but the words didn't come out. Zainab didn't wait. She gave a small, polite nod, turned around, and walked toward the same simple car she had arrived in. No hesitation. No looking back. As she sat inside and the car started moving, she looked out the window, her face calm, her eyes thoughtful. She had come there pretending to be someone with nothing, and they had treated her exactly the way she expected. But what she didn't expect was how easy this decision would feel in the end. Because she wasn't leaving with anger. She was leaving with clarity. And that changed everything. A few days later, Lagos was buzzing with one of the biggest business events of the year. The hall was filled with top entrepreneurs, investors, and well-known names. Cameras flashed, people networked, and the energy in the room felt important, powerful. And this time, Zainab wasn't hiding. She arrived in her own car. Elegant, confident, wearing a stunning outfit that matched her presence perfectly. Her hair was styled beautifully, and her natural glow didn't need anything extra. The same woman, but now fully seen. People greeted her with respect as soon as she walked in. "Zainab, good to see you. We've been hearing amazing things about your company. Congratulations on your recent expansion." She smiled, shook hands, and moved through the room with quiet confidence. This was her world. This was where she belonged. On the other side of the hall, Tund and his parents were also attending the event. They had come expecting a normal evening, networking, meeting important people, maybe making useful connections. They had no idea what was about to happen. As everyone took their seats, the host walked onto the stage and adjusted the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "our next speaker is one of the fastest-rising entrepreneurs in the logistics industry. Her company has grown rapidly and is now expanding across multiple cities." There was a pause as the lights shifted slightly toward the stage. "Please welcome Zainab Balagan." For a second, it didn't register. Then suddenly, it did. Tun's mother's eyes widened. His father sat up straight. Tund froze in his seat. "No, that can't be," his mother whispered under her breath. And then Zainab walked onto the stage. Confident, powerful. The same woman who had sat quietly at their dinner table, now standing in front of hundreds of people, owning the room without even trying. The audience began to clap, and the sound filled the hall. But at Tun's table, there was only silence. Their faces changed instantly. Shock, confusion, disbelief. Everything they thought they knew about her was breaking apart right in front of them. Zainab stood at the center of the stage, took a calm breath, and looked out at the audience. For a brief moment, her eyes passed over Tund and his parents. She didn't react. She didn't pause. She simply began to speak, strong, clear, and confident. And in that moment, the truth wasn't just revealed. It was undeniable. The room felt different now. Just minutes ago, it was full of normal conversations, polite smiles, and quiet networking. But the moment Zainab was introduced as a successful CEO and investor, everything shifted. People started whispering, "Isn't that the same Zainab from Balagan Logistics? I've heard her company is expanding internationally. She's one of the fastest-growing founders right now." The whispers spread quickly across the hall, building her image even bigger with every second. But at Tun's table, no one was whispering. They were frozen. His mother sat stiff in her chair, her eyes locked on the stage, trying to process what she was seeing. This couldn't be the same girl, the quiet, simple girl who sat at her dinner table just a few nights ago. But it was. His father, who barely looked at Zainab before, now couldn't take his eyes off her. His expression had completely changed. The same man who didn't even ask her a single question was now watching her like she was the most important person in the room. And Tund, he looked shocked, completely speechless. His mind was racing, replaying everything from that night, the way she answered their questions, the way she stayed calm, the way she didn't react. Now it all made sense, and at the same time, it made everything worse. Because this wasn't just about her success. It was about how wrong they had been. On stage, Zainab spoke with confidence, her voice clear and steady. She talked about her journey, her struggles, the risks she took, and how she built her company step by step. The audience listened carefully, some nodding, some taking notes, completely engaged. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She didn't need to. Her presence did that on its own. Back at the table, Tun's mother slowly leaned toward him and whispered, almost in disbelief, "Why didn't you tell us?" But Tund had no answer, because the truth was, Zainab never hid anything. They just never looked deep enough to see it. Everything they believed about her, that she was simple, not good enough, not matching their lifestyle, was falling apart right in front of them. In just a few seconds, their judgment had turned into shock. Their confidence had turned into silence. And the woman they had dismissed so easily was now far above anything they had imagined. When the event ended, people quickly gathered around Zainab. Some wanted to congratulate her, others wanted to connect, and a few just wanted a moment of her time. She handled it all with grace, smiling, shaking hands, speaking calmly like she always did. Then, through the crowd, she saw them. Tund, and his parents. They were walking toward her, but this time, everything about them was different. Their posture, their expressions, even the way they moved, it was all careful now. Respectful. Almost too respectful. When they finally reached her, there was a brief, awkward silence. Then Tun's mother spoke first. "Zainab," she said softly, her voice nothing like before. We didn't know." Zainab looked at her calmly, saying nothing. His father cleared his throat, trying to sound composed. "You're doing very well for yourself. It's impressive. We didn't realize." His words trailed off, like he didn't know how to finish the sentence. Tund stepped forward next. "Zainab, I'm sorry," he said quickly. "About that night. I should have said something. I didn't handle it right." For a moment, it almost sounded sincere. But Zainab didn't react the way they expected. She didn't smile. She didn't get emotional. She just listened, quietly. Her face was calm, but her eyes were clear, like she could see through everything now. Because the truth had already settled inside her. This wasn't really about an apology. This wasn't about suddenly understanding her. This was about what they had just seen on that stage. If that night had never happened, if she had stayed in that simple version of herself, would they be standing here like this? Would they be apologizing? Would they even care? Deep down, Zainab already knew the answer. Their respect didn't come from who she was as a person. It came from what she represented. Her success, her status, her power. She took a small breath and gave a polite nod, acknowledging their words, but not accepting them the way they hoped. Because some things, once seen clearly, can't be unseen. And Zainab understood something now, more than ever. Real respect doesn't appear when your life looks impressive. It shows up when you have nothing to prove. And theirs had come far too late. Zainab took a slow, steady breath and smiled. Not a big, flashy smile, just calm and confident. She looked at Tund and his parents, and softly said, "I didn't hide my worth, you just never looked for it." Her words hung in the air, quiet, firm, and impossible to argue with. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. The weight of truth carried itself perfectly. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. Her steps were steady, her head held high. Not angry, not hurt, just certain. She didn't need anyone's approval. She didn't need anyone's validation. She already knew her value, and no one could take that away. As she moved through the crowd, she thought about what she had learned that night, and that day at the event. Anyone who only respects you when you're successful, anyone who judges you without seeing the real you, they were never meant to be part of her life. They were never worth her energy, her time, or her love. And for the first time in a long time, Zainab felt completely free. Free from expectations, free from judgment, free from people who tried to measure her worth by something as shallow as appearances or status. The woman they had dismissed, underestimated, and ignored, she had become unstoppable, stronger, wiser, and far beyond anything they had imagined. And Zainab knew, with absolute certainty, that her life was hers to live, and no one else's opinion could change that. That night, walking away, she felt lighter, powerful, and proud. She wasn't just walking out of a room, she was stepping into a life that truly reflected her worth. And that was a life no one could ever take from her.